What happens when the world's biggest stars go completely off the rails? This is old Hollywood, like you've never seen it. Raw, reckless, and out of control. From secret affairs and wild addictions to scandals that nearly destroyed the industry, these 15 actors weren't just famous. They were dangerous. They broke rules, hearts, and sometimes the law. Some survived. Others burned out fast. But all of them left behind stories too wild to forget. So buckle up, because by the end of this list, you'll never look at Hollywood's golden age the same way again. Errol Flynn, the devil in the velvet cape. Errol Flynn wasn't just a movie star, he was a wildfire in human form. With his chiseled jawline, British accent, and devil-may-care attitude, Flynn became Hollywood's go-to hero. But the real man was far more dangerous than any pirate he played on screen. By the early 1940s, his off-screen behavior was making bigger headlines than his films. In 1942, Flynn was charged with statutory rape by 2 teenage girls. He was eventually acquitted, but the damage to his image was already done. Later stories revealed hidden peepholes and mirrors in his mansion, installed so he could spy on guests during private moments. "I like my whiskey old and my women young," Flynn once boasted, and that line says it all. He was also rumored to be involved in drug smuggling and even espionage. Some believed he had ties to Nazi agents during the war, though nothing was proven. Still, where there was smoke, there always seemed to be Flynn holding the match. By 50, his health had collapsed from years of alcohol, excess, and scandal. He died in a cloud of whispers, part legend, part cautionary tale. But Errol Flynn was only the beginning. Because our next name is someone you might not expect, a man known for making people laugh, whose personal life was anything but funny. Charlie Chaplin, the genius with a troubling pattern. Charlie Chaplin was comedy royalty. He built an empire with his silent films, his unforgettable mustache, and his ability to make people cry and laugh at the same time. But behind the lovable tramp was a man with a deeply controversial private life. Chaplin had a troubling pattern. He pursued teenage girls. At 35, he married 16-year-old Lita Grey, and the marriage quickly turned into a nightmare. Grey later said Chaplin was emotionally abusive and controlling. Things got worse when actress Joan Barry took him to court, claiming he fathered her child. Even though blood tests showed he wasn't the father, the judge ordered him to pay child support anyway. The media feasted on the scandal. Then came politics. Chaplin was accused of being a communist sympathizer during the Red Scare, and the U.S. government made its stance clear. In 1952, while he was traveling abroad, he was banned from returning to America. He never officially became a U.S. citizen. "I remain just one thing, and one thing only. And that is a clown," Chaplin once said. But the truth was far more complicated. The world laughed at him, but his private behavior told another story. Still, as dangerous as Chaplin's secrets were, the next man didn't hide his chaos. He wore it like a badge of honor. Robert Mitchum, the cool criminal. Robert Mitchum had the kind of swagger you couldn't fake. Laid back, brooding, and effortlessly cool. He didn't just act like a rebel, he lived like one. In 1948, Mitchum got busted at a Hollywood party for smoking marijuana. In those days, that could have ended a career overnight. But Mitchum didn't flinch. "It's just like being busted for holding a beer," he said with a shrug. He spent time in jail, but instead of sinking him, the scandal turned him into a legend. Hollywood quickly realized danger only made Mitchum more desirable. That wasn't the only trouble he caused. Mitchum was known for drunken bar fights, brawls on set, and talking back to directors. He hated playing by the rules, but audiences loved him for it. He once told a reporter, "The only difference between me and my characters is I don't shoot people." That line stuck, because it felt true. Some stars had their secrets buried. Mitchum let his chaos roam free. And yet, for all his recklessness, Mitchum still kept it somewhat controlled. Our next actor, not so much. He was fire and fury, a genius who often didn't care who got burned. Marlon Brando, Hollywood's volcano. Marlon Brando wasn't just an actor. He was an earthquake. When he hit the screen in A Streetcar Named Desire, Hollywood changed forever. But his talent came with a storm of personal chaos. Brando was intense, unpredictable, and emotionally explosive. He had dozens of affairs with women and men, wrecked multiple marriages, and once said, "I'm not sure I'm a human being." Behind the fame was a man who couldn't escape tragedy. His son, Christian, shot and killed his sister's boyfriend. Years later, his daughter Cheyenne took her own life. Brando was devastated and never fully recovered. He clashed with studios, refused to play by Hollywood's rules, and even rejected his Oscar for The Godfather. His political views were bold, but his behavior often pushed people away. Co-stars described him as brilliant and maddening. He could be loving one moment and distant the next. Brando lived like a man constantly at war with himself. His performances were unforgettable because they came from a place of deep, real pain. But even Brando's volcanic presence wasn't enough to shield the next man from darker allegations, ones the studio tried to bury for decades. Clark Gable, the king with a criminal past. Clark Gable was the king of old Hollywood, handsome, charming, and magnetic. He was the man every woman wanted, and every man wanted to be. But that perfect image? It came at a price. Behind closed doors, Gable's story turns dark. Actress Loretta Young, who worked with him on Call of the Wild, later revealed a terrible secret. Gable had assaulted her, and she became pregnant. In the 1930s, that kind of scandal would have ended both their careers. So the studio covered it up. Young disappeared for months, gave birth in secret, and pretended to adopt her own child. Gable was also a known womanizer. He had countless affairs, many with married women, and MGM worked hard to protect him from fallout. "The studio fixed everything back then," a publicist once said. "You just had to keep the press fed and the police out of it." To the public, he was Rhett Butler. In private, he was a man who left behind scars and secrets. Coming up next, the story of a star who fought demons so loud, even Katharine Hepburn couldn't silence them. Spencer Tracy, a private hell behind the talent. Spencer Tracy had the face of a classic leading man and the talent to match. On screen, he was steady, dignified, and calm. Off-screen, he was anything but. Tracy's life was a double act. He was a devout Catholic who refused to divorce his wife, even though he spent over 2 decades in a romantic relationship with Katharine Hepburn. To the public, they were just close friends. But behind closed doors, they were partners. The problem? His personal demons never let them truly be happy. Tracy was a heavy drinker, not just socially, but dangerously so. Friends and co-workers knew when he was spiraling. He would disappear for days, drink himself into a stupor, and return ready to work like nothing happened. On set, he could be charming one minute and vicious the next. He was known to throw tantrums, break down emotionally, and even physically lash out when drunk. One director described working with him as walking on glass with bare feet. Despite it all, studios protected him. His talent was too valuable, and Hepburn herself often acted as his shield. But the cost of keeping up appearances wore him down. In private, Tracy battled guilt, shame, and depression, a man pulled between his faith, his addiction, and the life he could never fully live. He died in 1967, just 2 weeks after finishing his final film. Hepburn later said, "He had demons, and they never let him go." And yet, as haunted as Tracy was, he wasn't the only one who unraveled in public. The next actor came from Hollywood royalty and fell harder than most ever imagined. John Barrymore, tragic royalty of the stage. John Barrymore was born into greatness. Part of the Barrymore acting dynasty, he had the talent, the name, and the voice of a Shakespearean god. In the 1920s and 30s, he was hailed as one of the greatest actors alive. But fame didn't satisfy him. Alcohol did. Barrymore's decline was heartbreaking. At first, he was known for drinking in style, fancy cocktails, late-night parties, and witty insults. But eventually, it turned darker. He started forgetting lines, missing rehearsals, and showing up to sets drunk or not at all. He became a punchline, the man who once played Hamlet now slurring through comedies just to pay the bills. Friends tried to intervene. He'd disappear for weeks at a time. When they found him, he was usually broke, disheveled, and surrounded by strangers. His home became a revolving door of chaos. One producer said, "John Barrymore was the only man I knew who could outdrink his own legacy." But it wasn't just the drinking. Barrymore's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He was known to pull vulgar pranks at high society parties, flirt shamelessly with married women, and insult studio heads to their faces. Eventually, he lost almost everything: his money, his career, and even his dignity. He died in 1942 at age 60, a man completely broken by the world. That once adored him. But if Barrymore was Hollywood's first great fall, the next story was its first full-blown scandal, a court case so ugly it nearly tore the film industry apart. Fatty Arbuckle, the scandal that shook Hollywood Roscoe. Fatty Arbuckle was one of silent cinema's biggest stars, literally and figuratively. He was beloved for his slapstick comedy, larger-than-life energy, and friendship with Charlie Chaplin. But in 1921, all of that came crashing down in one horrifying weekend. At a party in San Francisco, Arbuckle was accused of raping and fatally injuring actress Virginia Rappi. The press exploded with the story. Headlines called him a monster. Church groups boycotted his films. Hollywood panicked. Arbuckle was arrested and dragged through 3 separate trials. Though he was eventually acquitted, the public had already decided his guilt. The jury in the 3rd trial even issued an apology, saying there was not the slightest proof of guilt. But the damage was done. Studios cut ties. His films were banned. Arbuckle became the symbol of Hollywood excess, a target for politicians and moral crusaders who wanted to clean up the industry. Worse yet, he was blacklisted. Even under a fake name, he couldn't get decent work. He tried to come back, directing low-budget films, taking tiny roles, but the scandal followed him to the grave. He died in 1933 of a heart attack, just hours after signing a new film contract, the first real chance at a comeback in over a decade. Arbuckle's fall was more than personal. It triggered the creation of the Hays Code, Hollywood's first morality guidelines, and it proved that fame, even for the biggest star, could vanish overnight. But Arbuckle wasn't the only man to fall from the sky, because the next name on our list wore a cape on TV, but died surrounded by questions, whispers, and gunfire. George Reeves, Superman's fatal mystery. George Reeves was America's first Superman, heroic, noble, and unshakable. But off-camera, his real life was anything but heroic. In 1959, Reeves was found dead in his bedroom from a gunshot wound to the head. It was quickly ruled a suicide, but almost no one believed it. The mystery has haunted Hollywood for decades. Reeves had been involved in a messy affair with Toni Mannix, the wife of a powerful MGM executive with known mob connections. After trying to break things off, Reeves began dating a younger woman, And that's when things started getting weird. Friends said he felt watched, followed, even threatened. Some claimed he wanted out of the business entirely. Others believed he was getting too close to exposing something big. On the night of his death, Reeves was supposedly upstairs alone, but guests were downstairs and heard the shot. The crime scene was strange. No fingerprints on the gun. No gunpowder burns. Theories flew fast. Was it murder disguised as suicide? A jealous lover? A studio hit? Even today, no one knows for sure. What we do know is that Reeves, once a symbol of truth and justice, died surrounded by doubt. Superman was supposed to save people, one reporter wrote, but no one saved him. And speaking of hidden truths, our next actor kept his biggest secret locked away his entire life, until it made headlines across the world. Rock Hudson, the secret that shook America. Rock Hudson was Hollywood's perfect leading man. Tall, handsome, romantic, he lit up the screen in film after film. But he was living a lie. In a time when being openly gay could destroy a career, Hudson had no choice but to play a role in real life too. The studios carefully crafted his image. They even arranged a fake marriage to his secretary to silence rumors. He couldn't be himself, not in public, not even in private. Behind the scenes, he lived in fear. Friends had to keep secrets. Lovers had to hide. He once said, "I just want to be loved, but I have to pretend to be someone else to earn it." In 1985, the truth came out in the most heartbreaking way. Hudson was diagnosed with AIDS, one of the first major celebrities to reveal it. His illness shocked the world. It shattered the illusion of the all-American heartthrob and forced the nation to confront the AIDS crisis head-on. Some fans felt betrayed. Others admired his courage. But no one could ignore the impact. Hudson's death changed how the media talked about disease, about sexuality, and about Hollywood's pressure to hide the truth. He died that same year. But his final act, being honest about who he was, became his most powerful performance of all. And if Rock Hudson's story was built on secrets, our next actor lived under even tighter control, trapped in a role the studios wrote for him just to keep the truth from getting out. Tab Hunter, manufactured star, secret. Struggles. Tab Hunter looked like the perfect 1950s leading man. Blonde hair, sparkling smile, all-American charm. But behind that poster-perfect image was a man forced to live a lie every single day. Hunter was gay. And in an era when that was career suicide, the studio did everything in its power to keep it hidden. They arranged fake dates with starlets. Paparazzi were given staged photo ops. Publicists worked overtime scrubbing any whisper of the truth from the tabloids. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Hunter was terrified, constantly worried he'd be exposed. He was once arrested at a gay party in the early 50s. If the press had gotten hold of the story, it could have destroyed everything. "I couldn't be who I was," he later said. "Not in that system. Not back then." For years, he lived two lives, one for the cameras, one behind locked doors. Eventually, the pressure cracked him. His fame started to fade, and Hollywood moved on. But Tab Hunter didn't disappear. In the 2000s, he finally told his story in a memoir, revealing the toll of years spent hiding. Fans were shocked. Many were moved. He had survived an industry that chewed people up for much less. As one critic wrote, Tab Hunter wasn't just a heartthrob. He was a prisoner of the system, and somehow he found a way to break out. But not every star had that chance. The next man on our list lived fast, chased fame harder, and lost everything to the darker side of desire. Tony Curtis, the playboy, torn between glory and addiction. Tony Curtis had it all. the looks, the charm, the talent. He starred in hit after hit, from Some Like It Hot to Spartacus, and off-screen, he was living the Hollywood dream. But that dream came with a heavy price. Curtis had an obsession with fame and a hunger for pleasure that couldn't be satisfied. He claimed to have slept with hundreds of women, Marilyn Monroe among them. But the fun didn't stop there. Curtis developed a serious drug problem, diving deep into cocaine and heroin by the 70s. He once admitted, "If you remember the 70s, you weren't really there, and I barely was." His behavior became more erratic. He alienated directors, fought with producers, and burned through marriages like cigarette paper. He had 6 children, but some of them, including actress Jamie Lee Curtis, spoke publicly about how absent he was as a father. One daughter said she was completely cut out of his will, out of spite. Even at his lowest, though, Curtis never lost that flash of charisma. In interviews, he was charming and self-aware, a man who knew exactly how far he'd fallen and how many bridges he'd burned along the way. "I turned my life into a circus," he once said. "And sometimes, I forgot who the ringmaster was." But while Curtis was spiraling in public, another star was falling apart from the inside, a child prodigy who couldn't escape the glare of fame. Mickey Rooney, Hollywood's original wild child. Mickey Rooney wasn't just a child star, he was the child star. In the 1930s and 40s, he ruled the box office, starring in the wildly popular Andy Hardy films and raking in millions before he was old enough to drink. At one point, he was the highest-paid actor in America. But the spotlight that made him also never let him go. Rooney's life was a non-stop storm of marriages, scandals, and bad decisions. He was married 8 times, to beauty queens, starlets, and actresses, including Ava Gardner. But love never seemed to last. His relationships often ended in chaos, jealousy, and tabloid headlines. He gambled away his fortune more than once, falling into debt with casinos and shady figures who didn't forgive easily. It wasn't just money that slipped through his fingers. He trusted the wrong people, including family. In his later years, he accused his own stepson of abuse and financial theft. The man who'd once been America's most lovable teen icon died battling not just time, but betrayal. On set, Rooney was unpredictable. He was fiery, stubborn, and often reckless. Directors dreaded his mood swings. He could be brilliant one moment, then vanish the next. He drank heavily, partied endlessly, and carried the kind of energy that burned everyone around him out. "I never had a childhood," Rooney once said. "I just had a career." And it showed. He never truly outgrew the spotlight or the need to be adored. Well into his 90s, he was still chasing roles, still doing interviews, still performing. It was as if stepping away would mean facing the life he'd never had. Hollywood gave him everything, but it also took pieces of him he never got back. He became a living reminder that child stardom can be both a blessing and a lifelong trap. And while Rooney's story was about survival, the next man on our list didn't make it to old age. He came and went like lightning, fast, thrilling, and gone before anyone was ready. James Dean, too fast to live, too wild to die. James Dean had only 3 major films, but it was enough to make him immortal. With his rebel energy, brooding face, and restless spirit, Dean was the perfect symbol of youth in crisis. But behind that myth was a young man with a dangerous streak he couldn't shake. Dean loved speed. He raced motorcycles, drove Porsches, and lived for the thrill. People around him worried. He would ignore red lights, push engines to their limit, and laugh about how close he got to crashing. Friends said he had a death wish. He once told a journalist, "I live every day like I'm going to die tomorrow, and maybe I will." In 1955, that line became prophecy. Driving a silver Porsche he called the Little Bastard, Dean crashed on a California highway and died at just 24. The accident shocked the world, but it also cemented his legend, young, beautiful, and gone too soon. Rumors swirled after his death, about his sexuality, about his relationships with powerful men in the studio system, about a curse attached to the car that killed him. None of it was ever confirmed, but the mystery only added to the myth. James Dean didn't just play the rebel. He was one. And like many rebels, he never made it past the first act. But while Dean's legend was short-lived, the final name on our list lived a long life, filled with seduction, scandal, and total control. Warren Beatty, the heartthrob who couldn't be tamed. Warren Beatty wasn't just a star, he was a force of nature. Handsome, smooth-talking, and magnetic, he didn't chase Hollywood, it chased him. And along the way, he left a trail of stories that made him as feared as he was desired. Beatty reportedly slept with thousands of women, some say over 12,000. His lovers included co-stars, models, and even politicians' wives. But he wasn't just a ladies' man, he was a control freak on set. Directors struggled with him. Scripts were rewritten to fit his vision. If Beatty didn't like how a scene was going, he'd shut down production until he got his way. His relationships were famously short-lived, except for the one that lasted. In the 90s, he shocked everyone by settling down with Annette Bening. But by then, his reputation was already sealed. "I've never known anyone more charming," one actress said. Or more dangerous. Beatty could make or break a movie with one call. He understood Hollywood power like few ever have, and he used it to shape his own legend. Sometimes for art, sometimes for ego. In the end, Warren Beatty didn't crash. He didn't burn out. He kept going, fueled by control, desire, and the need to be the center of every room he walked into. Because in old Hollywood, some stars fell, but a few ruled the chaos.